Don't just shit yourself.
I'll start the podcast by shitting myself. That would be good, wouldn't it?
I mean, I guess it would be a sort of cruelty to... Well, it would be a cruelty to me, yeah.
Oh, glorious.
Glorious day. And the sunshine upon us.
Poo tube.
That's a different website.
Well, it put me in the mood.
Oh, God. What mood?
For cruelty.
You got that right.
So we had a false start.
Slightly weird atmosphere right now.
Well, I couldn't be asked, but I feel like that fart has enlivened me.
No, it was slapping me about with meats that enlivened
What
you.
my fart was.
What?
I didn't slap you about with meats. I was just showing you what we bought in the shopping.
And then you put it on my face.
Pardon me. Because I get priority shopping slots. They kind of there's an 8-hour window because you're going to be in anyway if you're shielding. So we decided to start.
It's not just because they were like, yeah, fuck
no,
it.
we decided to start the podcast, and then we were going to pause it when the shopping turned up. But it turned up after. It's probably a good job actually.
I thought was going to happen, but
it's probably a good job that it did though, because it was
getting up every time.
I wasn't in the mood for a podcast.
Are you now?
Well, I'm more than I was. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Although I'm a little bit depressed because I think we're the
in the club.
I think we have the smallest listenership on the network.
That's nothing new.
Pardon me, but like I say, I think that's the length which is working against us. It's always been a problem for me. At least react.
No, that was not worthy.
We are not worthy. Right, what are we going to do today?
I have done the impression. We're going to record a podcast, but we could.
Because this could be the last one for 4 weeks, couldn't it?
No.
Last breaking bollocks for 4 weeks.
Maybe, but there'll still be a podcast.
There will. But should we explain?
Well, we'll get into the actual podcast and then do that.
No, you're not allowed to start it.
Fuck you.
I don't think that would be appropriate.
Fucking hell. Yeah, this is what gets you energized.
What?
Me trying to do my fucking intro and just
We'll get on with it then.
Getting kicks out of being as much of a shit as possible.
Get on with it.
But yes, that's apparently what you're here for. What?
Did you say buy your fluffy something?
I guess that's what apparently people are here for.
For what? Well, yeah, all 20 of them at a push.
That's actually quite a lot. I'm actually quite pleased with that, to be honest.
At a push. Some weeks it's less than 15, but
it's more than YouTube gets. So anyway,
I just think people see 2 hours and think, can't really. Yeah,
I just listen to podcasts when I'm like going to sleep. So longer it is, the better, because I have insomnia.
That's what she said.
Unofficially. Is it official? I'm not sure. I did get medication for it, so I guess it's kind of half official. But I've not been diagnosed with insomnia. But yeah. Anyway, can I do it?
Yeah, last episode we got a quarter of an hour in before we inserted the introduction, didn't we?
No, we didn't.
Was it 10 minutes?
But that's fairly normal. My brain thought you said 3/4 of an hour.
Absolutely nothing
my
normal.
Ears knew that you didn't.
There's absolutely nothing normal. There's no frame of reference for normal.
Fuck off.
What? Yeah, but if I did that, you'd be left here all on your own, and you'd have to have a conversation with yourself.
I do that for my reviews. I might say read.
Yeah, but at least you're kind of playing a game. You're talking about something specific.
I'm sure I could just talk to myself for an hour. It wouldn't be entertaining, but I'm sure I could do it.
Well, I used to do that for Better Call Paul.
I just do that instead of functioning sometimes.
You just sit in your room and talk to yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people do it in their heads, but do you actually like get a mirror out and?
No.
Or you just like? Do you actually?
Why would I
physically
want
talk?
to look at myself?
Would you actually talk though?
Sometimes
out
like,
loud.
Whisper.
Ooh, self ASMRing.
Well, it's because if I start just talking to myself at like a normal speaking volume, first it would like wake people up, and you would think that I had gone insane.
You wouldn't have far to go.
Yeah. Anyway, enough about my sad life.
Cheer up, you old bugger. Sorry, I just felt like saying that. It's not very much help, but it felt jolly and.
I don't think I'm that
What is
old,
that
and I
of?
don't think I've ever buggered anyone.
Well, you don't think? Would you not know? What? Oh yeah, no. I was trying to remember what I remember that from, and it was pardon me, the introduction to Always Look on the Bright Side of Life, wasn't it?
Yep. Can I do my intro?
I don't know. Can you? Is it something that you can do?
Shut the fuck up. Right, if you've missed it, just
Missed what?
you put all of this before the intro, don't you?
Yeah. Why?
It's just if it's worth even explaining. If you've missed it for the past while for starting intros, I've been trying to
Oh yeah.
mix and match it a bit.
Yeah, and I never know what's coming.
It's a bloody noisy thing out there.
No, I think that's going.
Right. Anyway.
What?
Can I do my intro? Will you not interrupt?
Know. I'm waiting to find out whether you can or not. Because until you have, we won't know whether you can.
Right. Hello, cruel.
See, apparently you can.
Fucking dickhead. Stab you.
Meow.
I have questions, but okay.
Floaty potato. Don't hit me. Don't hit me. There'll be evidence. Come on, get on with it.
Trying to contain your excitement there.
I am. Positively
Shut the fuck up.
Volcanic. It's
Shut
gonna
up.
I can't.
Shut up.
I can't.
Shut up.
You seem to think I've got ADHD, don't you?
It's a strong suspicion.
That's only when I'm kind of not dulling myself down.
Okay. I mean, you might just be a crackhead. There's a chance. Anyway. Hello, cruel world. I am Firebolt.
And I am the Orbiter.
Very
Yeah, well, I'm
weird
mixing it up as well because you're not the only one who gets to play with the audience's expectations.
Okay. Well, I think we normally do that, and it's normally trying to limbo under them. Anyway, welcome to
Spread your legs. Not you, them.
Anyway, Fucking hell, you always derail me.
Well, Craig would be easy to limbo under because he's about 7 foot tall. So
that's not how people work. But anyway, welcome.
What's that? Is that your? Have you left your buzzer on your phone?
Shut up. Welcome.
You left your fucking.
I will choke you.
You brought a vibrator into the podcast.
I will kill you. Live. Not live. Fuck off.
Cruelty.
Welcome to episode fucking 77 of the stupid fucking podcast.
77. Wow. How is this going to go today?
I don't know.
How do we even exist as a
you
thing?
Might to cease doing that thing.
I mean, we're going to run out of subjects, which brings me to some news.
Well, do you want to go over channel news or person? Wait, do we have any personal news?
Well, our Christmas holiday is about to finish.
Oh yeah. Oh fuck. World news.
I mean, it's only a month since Christmas Eve, so
since the last podcast, a new president has come into power.
Well, I mean, new to the presidency, but he's not exactly new, is he? He's more old.
Yeah. Well, do we want to discuss channel news before we get on to that?
I don't know. Do we? How will we find out?
Well, we'll do it anyway, right? I think I said this on the last episode.
I think you might have done, actually.
You might not have remembered or listened to it.
Yeah.
About a new podcast starting up, which should be like alternating with this in the fortnight.
We're running out of subjects, aren't we?
We're not really.
We've used every word in the dictionary.
We haven't used aardvark yet.
You want to do an episode on aardvark?
I'm sure that would be interesting.
It'd be really aardvark. Oh, we've gone all dizzy. Ooh.
Please.
It's going to be like 2 hours of me just pissing myself laughing.
Why are you laughing?
I have no idea. I don't know. It's funny though.
It's genuinely just snapped. It's just gone. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Don't you? When was the last time you had a laughing fit? A giggle fit? Do write in and tell us if you had an uncontrollable giggling fit while listening to this podcast and had to be taken to hospital because you could not breathe.
You also might have COVID.
Hard luck.
Fuck. Oh fuck! Everything's terrible. Anyway, yeah.
Well, that's something we could do in this episode. Cruel jokes.
No.
Cruel humour.
No. Can we just move with the fucking format?
Get on with it then.
Instead of just breaking down into insanity.
Get on with it then. I'm waiting for you to say something. There's an animal loose in the room.
I will walk off.
It'll be a really short episode then. The people might listen to it for a change.
We wouldn't be able to tell if that's just because I left or because of the short length. Anyway, yes, a new podcast idea, if you're quite done, which I think I said about in the last episode, is I think we decided on the name Breaking Borders. Either that or you just said that and that's what I latched on to.
Did I?
Which is essentially...
Is that my idea?
Trying to go through...
Aren't I clever?
Not every country, probably, because there's some countries that just really small or really new, and it's kind of difficult to find information on, at least online.
I'm sure the Pope wouldn't come on our podcast either.
Well, we discussed also having like guests on some episodes, which would be for ones that we know people from those places.
Although if we dressed it up in a cassock, he might.
What the fuck are you talking about?
The Pope.
Yeah, I don't care.
Come on our podcast.
There might actually be quite interesting history behind the Vatican, although I'm not sure how much music you could find that's not just general religious music. So the idea was to basically go through the sort of general background. We'd go over the news like we do on this, and then sort of segue into that with the news of the country that we're looking at.
My disappointment to you on the podcast.
What?
It just occurs to me that you seem to be quite interested in doing a fairly serious podcast, and I just mess it up. Is it for us? I
think that's our USP. Unique selling point.
You use the jargon.
It's called being forced to learn business lingo in English class, because that's all English is really useful for.
What business?
Marketing. Anyway, and then basically going over a bit of the history, the idea to sort of entice you, because it is a very sort of thing that I would be interested in, normally like with my interests in flags and just general stuff from around the world.
You could do a podcast on flags.
I could. The music from different places, as well as just sort of different genres, I guess.
Indeed.
But
because I haven't got enough to do.
Yeah. Well, the problem with that is that it does take. I mean,
I'll do something.
We'll probably get into the flow
on.
of it.
Do we know? Are we going to have guests on?
Not for the first episode, as far as I know, because I don't know anywhere from the place that we are planning to do our first episode on, which might take up next time. It's not next week, but next fortnight slot, depending on when things are ready. That's the plan, and it is on.
Well, the thing is,
it's.
Are people gonna
do the mystery reveal?
Oh, you want to do it? You want to announce it now?
Yeah. Well, we'd normally, I imagine, reveal what the next
thing is. It's going to be on a different feed, isn't it? So people won't necessarily know where to find it.
Well, yeah. Well, you can probably figure out how to link it or something. I don't know.
Why don't we? Why don't we put it out as a special on the Breaking Bollocks channel?
Yeah. Just
so that people can find it and we can announce in the first episode.
The other benefit of that might be that
so it'll be on
it's an unworkable idea and it just falls apart. Yeah. So it might only be a one episode thing, but it'll still probably be
I'm quite interested.
Yeah, it's just the workload of it, I guess. Because like that Bollocks thing.
Yeah, you're assuming that that I'll put much work into it. I mean, I'll do something for it, but I suppose it depends what you mean by work, doesn't it? I mean, we'll see what happens.
The idea is that most of the work would be on my side because the history is generally going to be more complex than finding like.
So that could be dangerous because you could end up doing a load of work and coming along with a load of serious information, and I just end up kind of bringing the tone of the podcast down and pissing you off.
Not less like QI.
I suppose.
Anyway, yeah, so the episodes the country that we were going to be doing our first episode on, or perhaps only episode on, is
Indonesia.
That was very synchronized.
Indonesia.
Which is, well, I hopefully won't spoil too much before we get into it, but it's a country that I don't know a huge amount about the history of, other than like the cursory research I've done a bit of already. It's the fourth largest in terms of population in the world. And it's very big. So it seems like something would be interesting to know about. And
funnily enough, when you said about music, there was one genre of music which came immediately into my head when the first country came up. I know comes from Indonesia, but I shall leave it for the episode.
Okay. Yeah, so part of the idea of that was also that maybe you would do a little bit of music history, but that'll depend on what time you have available and whether
we shall see. Actually,
it's the sort of thing that will probably work out the format as
because I've been
we go along a bit.
Preparing for starting uni again. I've been over the last few days. Over the last sort of fortnight, I've been kind of resting up anyway because of my surgery that I had. But because I'm starting to get a bit more mobile now, I've started sort of preparing for the start of term, and I'm finding myself less stressed about it than I have in the past because I'm finding myself not trying to do everything at once. In the past, I've had this habit of, like, for instance, I've been doing some admin and accounting over the last couple of days because it's coming up to tax return time. And whereas before I would have been like really stressed out and spent like all day doing it and then probably all of the next day as well because it's like, oh, I've got so much to get through, it's got to get done. Now I'm finding it easier to, I don't know if it's just my state of mind because I've been allowing myself to relax and kick back a bit, is to just like when I've done, like I did all the scanning of the bank statements today and I just thought, you know what, that'll do. I've done a chunk of work on it. I'll do some more tomorrow. I've got till the end of the month, so I'll just do and it's happening. That's what I'm finding myself doing my practice as well now every day, like 3/4 of an hour on each, and just like leaving it at that instead of just like thinking, oh, I need to practice all day every day to be the.
I did have a weird moment earlier because it sounds really weird. I think you maybe had like the quieter thing on the, not the mute, but what's the thing?
I have a it's called Silent Brass. It's like a practice mute thing, but you can plug headphones into it so that
but I just sort of heard this sort of faint sort of wailing sound, and I thought like Mum was just in horrible pain.
The thing is,
I was like, what the fuck is that noise?
There is a lot of stuff that goes on with sort of private practice for brass instruments in particular that doesn't sound very musical because you're working on your lip muscles. So, the idea isn't necessarily to get the most beautiful sound. It's to work on your lip muscles, which can be
much like a blowjob.
I mean, some of it is doing lip buzzing, which is like you do the process of playing a brass instrument, but without the instrument, and then you do it just on the mouthpiece part. So instead of like blowing into a trumpet, I'll go.
It's a lovely sound,
and that's and it's
I know.
Pure,
I watched like a thing on like the history of like
you see YouTube videos of slowed down vibrations of your lips. Sorry, carry on.
It was like something I think it was at the British Museum of this sort of shell that they think. No, it was of
they used to play the conch.
Yeah, they used to play the conch shell, and then there was also something that was like some kind of like boar's head or something that was supposed to be like on it. I can't remember much of it, but they were explaining like the history of like how that conch shell sort of morphed into trombone, and it's actually like one of the simplest instruments that we still have
via the sack butt.
Yes, and how basically on the trombone that's just basically just amplifying that sound.
Yeah.
Which is like how the conch shell thing works so well because it's
you're basically just blowing into an amplifier.
Yeah,
well, not blowing. You're vibrating your lips.
I mean, on trumpet there are valves and stuff that are a bit more complicated than the trombone, but
but all that's doing is lengthening and shortening the air column.
Yeah. So
fascinating stuff.
Anyway, President Biden, what are your thoughts?
Well, thank fuck Trump's gone. For a start. But I don't know. It really depends. I don't think impeachment is going to. I don't think he's going to get indicted. Even if they do, well, they are pursuing the case, aren't they? They are sort of.
Yeah, it's going.
I don't think they'll get the 2/3 majority as things stand. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. It's just, he's got a hell of a job on his hands, hasn't he? I mean, QAnon are a bit confused now. I suppose that's one thing.
Yeah, with the people celebrating this, like, I get if you're happy that Trump's gone, but if you're genuinely happy that Biden is there, then I don't think you've been paying attention, or you don't have the same goals that I do, at least.
Do many?
No, but like, to see that as an okay sort of thing, or even a good thing, to have Biden in, it's just like, I can get how people are celebrating that he's gone, but
see, the thing is, I mean, looking back at the list of presidents that I've kind of lived through, he's not bad in that list, really. I mean, even Barack Obama, even some of the things that I've heard about some of the things that he did, even he's probably among the best of them, but at the same time,
but it's sort of like, I don't really have a favourite war criminal. No. I think it's weird to have one.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to be any. I mean, you could sort of argue about the sort of practical effects of their presidency after the fact, because they're all evil. Like, categorically,
I suppose
they are some of the worst people, and they get into that position because of that.
I suppose there's in most things there are positive and negative aspects to most situations. I'm not sure what the positives of Trump's administration would be. Although I do find it quite interesting that Joe Biden has referred to Boris Johnson as physically and, I don't know if it was genetically, it was like physically and politically almost a clone of Donald Trump.
Well, yeah, it's that sort of the strong man thing that I think, although people were like that long before Trump, he sort of started a trend.
Reminds me,
that's been sort of nicknamed Trumpism.
There's a new Sky original drama being made, which I think is coming out autumn next year, it said, which I'm assuming is perhaps 2022, if it, unless it was just a mistake and it's autumn this year. But Kenneth Branagh has been lined up to play Boris Johnson in a Sky original drama approaching the whole COVID situation through the eyes of the Prime Minister, basically.
Interesting.
Well, I'm actually quite intrigued by that, because the things I've seen Kenneth Branagh do, he's one of those actors that, in my eyes, you can sometimes just not tell it's him, because he's that good an actor that it's like, wait a minute, you know, there's not that many that can do that, I think. And I don't think I've seen him play a bad... In fact, I think the weakest role I've probably seen him play has been in Harry Potter. But... Who
is he playing that?
But that's more the character, I think, than his portrayal of it. The one that Hermione has a crush on, the teacher. That thinks he's brilliant. He gets his mind wiped. Yeah. Gilderoy Lockhart, yeah.
Anyway, on a related note, I see transfers getting their piss boiled over Biden essentially putting in discrimination protections on day one, which is one of the good things I guess he's done. It's sort of like, yeah, that's a good thing, but like, there's going to be a lot of stuff that people have been talking about all throughout the Trump administration that was going on in the Obama administration and just will shut up about now because it's not politically convenient.
Well, speaking of transphobes, I thought it was funny to see Russians getting arrested for snowball fighting.
Yeah. The interesting contrast. Navalny, who I believe was Putin's political opponent, has been jailed in what essentially not really like a trial. I think it was just basically him and a judge in like a police station.
They're warming up for some kind of parliamentary elections or something coming up in June, I think it is.
All right.
But yeah, he's. I mean, it's interesting to see that fight back, the protests and that happening there, as well as seeing the protests that were happening in America of different kinds. It's almost like there's a fight back happening. But I did hear today that the problem that America perhaps has at the moment is that the more they push back against Russia, the more likely they are to sort of not force them, but kind of push them in China's direction politically. And China are a lot more powerful than Russia. And that was what the commentary was.
Push Russia and
whereas Trump was always he refused to criticize Putin, really, didn't he?
I mean, not like outright, but yeah, it definitely was a lot cozier than feels.
But everyone's like kind of, the international community is quite rightly up in arms at the moment about the treatment of the protesters and stuff in Russia over the last couple of days. And the worry, I think, is that it's not Russia that's so much of a worry in that sense. But if they start cozying up to China, then who have perhaps a more similar kind of political treatment of the they're more into repression.
I'm not sure if they're more into. I guess
public surveillance and intolerance of minority groups, and
it's more how free the information is, I guess, because I would say based on what I saw of the protests around Navalny, the US police response is probably
that's true
in some ways worse to what I see over in Russia.
Yeah,
but the information's a lot more restricted from what I gather.
Yeah,
and dissidents and people that blow the whistle. That said, like people that blow the whistle here and in America,
that's the thing.
Have to exile in Russia. So
yeah, that's the thing that kind of strikes me. We were going to bring up the film we watched last night, weren't we? Official Secrets, which is on Prime.
Well, the particular reason I mentioned that is the sort of way in that film. Sort of spoilers, but it is based on real events, so it's kind of spoilers for something that's already happened.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing in it that I didn't already know about, but it's just the way it's presented. It's like, yeah, that's actually pretty bad, but it's because it hasn't been drip fed to you over years and years.
If you don't know, it's basically about a whistleblower shortly before the Iraq War who. Basically,
the second Iraq War.
Yeah, who basically leaked a memo saying that they were going to blackmail UN Security Council members into voting for the war so that it wouldn't be illegal.
Yeah, but one of the things that I found really interesting was that a lot of what was shown on screen in my mind, wouldn't have seemed out of place in a political drama set in Russia. And it's weird because it's that far removed in time now. Seeing those things almost from the outside, from the present, it's kind of it does make you realize that what we accept as our country that we live in is not necessarily the image that we are given, that we are fed all the time.
We sell arms to an absolute monarchy who is fueling one of the worst humanitarian crises in history.
Yeah. And the other thing is as well that struck me that at that time, I think it was an easier thing to do because it was before the sort of social media revolution, if you like. It was kind of perceived that it's not that you trusted the government, but in most respects, you kind of expected them not to lie to you about the really important stuff like going to war and the justification for going to war. Whereas nowadays, it does seem much more a widely accepted thing that the governments all around the world just systematically lie to the populations. It's almost like corruption is so recognized and widespread now that it's just like you just kind of there's this kind of, well, what can we do? It's just like sort of, yeah, you just kind of not shrug your shoulders, but it's like, well, we know it's happening, but what point does it have to get to before there's some kind of revolution? And even if there was, what would our system be replaced by? It's almost like that is that paradox that if you, like you said, if you get to the point where you are powerful enough to have a position of like president of a country, you kind of got to be the kind of person who is corrupt and evil and cruel, and you've got to be ruthless to get to that position.
Yeah, which is fundamentally why, at least from my perspective, Jeremy Corbyn couldn't become Prime Minister, because although, I mean, like all politicians, I have no doubt there are many flaws behind closed doors that I'm not able to see, but like, well, at least publicly,
and if you walked into a room that didn't have a flaw, you'd fall down a hole.
In the public eye and in his past record, he seemed pretty principled, which is not what apparently makes a good Prime Minister. So,
yeah, he's not. What's he doing? Because he can't serve for the party anymore, can he? He can't be an MP for the Labour Party. Has he gone independent, or because is he still an MP?
I think he was reinstated. Maybe, I don't know.
He was reinstated to the Labour Party, but I don't think he can be an MP for them.
With that whole issue around sort of trying to tackle anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, it just strikes me that I think there's more of a problem in the Tory Party of anti-Semitism itself, but also quite obviously of Islamophobia, particularly high up.
Yeah,
and. Have you legitimately ever heard any like mainstream media source like bring up the issue of anti-Semitism in the Conservative Party?
Well, no, because it's traditionally the one that they use against Labour. It's their weapon. I mean, it's weaponization of.
Yeah, and after the fact, a lot of the racism. Coverage was deemed to be misleading or just straight up inaccurate. And even like amongst typically more left-leaning newspapers, it made up a weirdly disproportionate amount of their coverage of just everything.
What my problem is, because I can go along the lines of just kind of accepting, not liking, but recognizing that you're going to get lied to by the politicians and the people in power, and it's all corrupt and all that. But
it's like degrees to which that happens.
How do you assess which media are towing party lines? You know, because it's this whole thing with press releases and stuff, isn't it? About like, you know, certain papers sell certain agendas, and it's like, are they doing that because they're getting backhanders, or, you know, there's so much behind the scenes stuff going on that it's like, I mean, we reckon we've got freedom of the press here, and I think, is it The Guardian, which is which doesn't take any sponsorship, any private sponsorship?
Yeah, most of the ones other than the BBC, whose more recent sort of output is quite questionable in my eyes.
I don't watch their news anymore.
But yeah, generally the more principled ones, although they still slip up, seem to be ones that like run on donations, because essentially freedom of the press, it's only so much as so like, well, most of the press is owned by a couple of monopolies, so
but see what gets to me,
they're free to operate within that person's interests.
I would consider subscribing to The Guardian online, because I've often read their articles online, because you know, there've been links to it, and it's a headline that really pulls my interest, and you just get invited to donate. You get a certain amount of articles that you can read in full for free. I'm not sure if you can with The Guardian, if it's all of them. I know
it is.
Yeah, but they just ask you to subscribe if you can.
Yeah, I think the idea is that they don't want to put it behind a paywall, because
yeah,
you know, there shouldn't be restrictions to the information that you can access.
There are some papers where you can only see so many free articles, and then you have to subscribe, aren't there? But
so I vaguely remember quite a while back, I think it was the New York Times put like a paywall on their website, which was, at least at the time, technically illegal.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. There's so many things that used to be considered corrupt and it's snowing, yay, they've had loads of snow in England, we've had fuck all up here. Anyway, what was I going to say, when I see people talking about The Guardian as a sort of lefty liberal kind of thing, as though that's an insult,
it's only so much as so like I think we've discussed this before, like the Overton window is shifted so far right, by essentially repeatedly having this thing of like, oh, it's the lesser two evils, and then picking just people that get further and further right wing.
That's my point, though. How do you have a reasoned conversation with somebody about politics when they see that kind of description as an insult, that something's lefty or liberal?
But like,
because it's like, and what's the problem with that?
Apparently he considered himself a socialist, although like none of his policies seem to really aim towards anything that is actually socialist. He's probably at best progressive, but I would say that he probably fits more as a centrist or even slightly right-leaning.
I mean, it's a bit of a paradox, because that whole idea of liberal being either centre or left is, for me, the word liberal means the same thing that a lot of the really far right people are talking about when they say about freedom and rights.
Well, it's quite complicated, because the sort of history of liberalism is, I mean, it goes back into like the 1800s and stuff like that.
Stuff like the 1800s?
Well, it goes back quite a long way, and the meaning shifted over time. But like neoliberalism, which is what I think, at least what I used to think most people were talking about when they say liberals in like any serious sense rather than just going, oh, them darn liberals over there being with their fucking gay flags and shit. But like we're talking like about liberalism in an academic sense, I guess. Neoliberalism refers to like Reagan and Thatcher's politics, which is fundamentally very right wing to put your centre, and that's kind of what Joe Biden represents and what Obama represents. And then you sort of realize that sort of like, at least in Obama's elections, like you were essentially two neoliberals with different social policies. With slightly different views on taxation.
I suppose with the American situation with Joe Biden and that, what I'm concerned about is what happens in 4 years' time, and I suppose 2 years as well with the midterms.
Well, see, that's the thing.
But I think a lot of that will be heavily dependent on COVID.
Putting in the guy who was vice president in the administration preceding a fascist kind of feels like you're kicking the can down the road a bit, especially when I don't know if Trump's actually going to get impeached. He might come back, or someone worse might.
He's going to be... I mean, you don't happen to know Joe Biden's actual age, do you? Or Donald Trump's? Because I did hear that he would be getting on a bit for running for presidency in 4 years' time. And, I mean, the thing is...
78.
The Republicans are difficult to read, aren't they? Because, you know, a lot of them have criticised what happened on the Capitol Hill, but when that's, 2 or 3 years in the past, and there's a lot of support for Donald Trump.
Donald Trump's 74.
And how old is Joe Biden, sorry?
78.
All right, okay. So it would be just the same age if he went for the next presidency after Joe Biden. He would just be the same age that Joe Biden is now then.
Yeah, and arguably maybe in like similar health. I don't know. He might even be in better health, Donald Trump.
Do you think? He's certainly got more weight on him.
I don't really know. It's sort of a worrying thing though when it's sort of like, oh, will our politicians just die of old age or random things that like were just acceptable in the past? Or could we actually have a functioning political system that doesn't rely on fucking fossils?
Did you see there was a campaign to have him replaced in Home Alone 2 by like sort of the grown-up version of Macaulay Culkin? They were going to sort of map his face over Donald Trump's. But apparently the reason that he was in that was because they wanted to use his hotel for the film, and he agreed to it, but he said, "Yep, I want to be in the film though." That was his demand, so he kind of forced his way into it. But
I mean, I don't think they should have made a second one, to be honest.
What, Home Alone?
Yeah,
I think the second one's supposed to be quite good. I don't really remember it, but
I remember watching it, but I don't remember anything about it. Home Alone 1 was good, now. But like they probably should have stopped there.
Don't know. I think I would probably watch Home Alone 2 just to see a lot of New York, to be honest, because I like New York.
It's kind of like a one-shot concept, really.
Yeah, but that's quite often the case when people are disappointed by films, though, is it's like you're not really going into it with an expectation that matches the subject. I mean...
What?
Well, I mean, if you go along expecting anything other than just that kind of, it's the same as the first film, but this time he's lost in New York instead of lost on his own at home. Well, not lost,
it
but
kind of loses the idea of it being Home Alone then, because he's not home.
Well,
I'm saying that they should make a sequel, not that like the sequel's bad. It's just the idea of making a sequel to a lot of things, it just isn't good. It's cash grabs usually.
Yeah, which they're kind of there to make money, I suppose. Film studios, aren't they?
They don't really critically hold up, and it's not something that's really worth spending your time watching a lot of the time.
If you're a film critic, maybe, but if you just wanted a bit of mindless entertainment on a Saturday afternoon, then
I suppose so. I mean, if it was on, I wouldn't like.
I mean, you
complain.
forget
There are worse things.
I've watched Big Brother. You know.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think any claim to having taste is gone after that.
I think you can be in danger of perhaps coming across as slightly snobbish if you put a quality level on your art.
What being like critically thinking about media is snobbish.
Well, let's face it, you like a steak, but it doesn't mean you wouldn't eat at McDonald's.
No, but I'm not exactly gonna like say,
but you don't
that was a really great burger. It's like no, it's just
but
like,
you're not.
I'm tired. I need.
But you're not gonna diss it because you were expecting it to be steak.
Yeah, but you don't spend 2 hours eating a burger.
I don't spend 2 hours eating a steak; it would go cold.
Anyway, slightly weird tangent there.
Well, yeah, it's just you get what you expect, or you expect what you
Biden,
blah blah blah.
Generally, yeah, I think there's possibilities for good things to be done in his administration, but make no mistake, that has nothing to do with him. It's to do with actual principal politicians pushing him to do that.
Oh, I'm good at making mistakes.
But yeah, there's a bunch of things that I think one of the things that he did promise to do on day one was to cancel student debt, because that's a...
Oh, they could do that here. That'd be good.
It was a really... Well, I mean, in Scotland, we don't really have as much of a problem on that because we don't actually require you to like pay them back after a certain period, and it's only over a certain amount that they'll actually take off your income. So
I'm pretty sure that's the same in the UK, but in England,
it's not as far as I know.
Well, it is, because I had student loans in England that I still have that haven't been paid back yet.
All right. But also tuition fees in England are...
Yeah, I didn't have tuition fees back then.
I think effectively triple, if not more. And tuition fees in America are
about
even worse.
£9,000 a year or something, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah, and the government doesn't pay that in England, at least.
Which is ridiculous. I mean, yeah, that is.
But yeah, basically because it's to the point where it's like an economic problem, the amount of students, or former students that have outstanding debt.
I kind of hear the people arguing for charging tuition fees in the back of my head, and I think I should just qualify why I think it's wrong that the government doesn't pay tuition fees is, for me, because yes, I get that, you know, the idea that people are potentially going to be entering a profession where they're going to afford to pay it back, but the other thing is, if the government pays for quality training of the kind that you would get from a degree, and say, for instance, take a doctor, you know, it's like an investment. You know, the government gets value for
especially
that. Right now,
especially with Brexit, which
the country gets value for
we'll
that.
get onto shortly before getting on to the actual topic of the podcast. Having doctors trained up, it's sort of something like they shouldn't have to pay for that privilege, because that's just going to be a benefit. And even if they're going into like a degree that, like,
let's put it the right way round. It's not a privilege. You're training to help people. You're training to serve the public.
Yeah, which is primarily
why you get paid well for it, but you fucking well should, because you're saving lives.
Primarily why immigrants make up a disproportionate amount of our NHS, and telling them to fuck off is also a terrible idea on any level, not just telling the doctors to fuck off. This isn't a like, oh, you need to be this skilled to work here, because it's just a very capitalist mindset, and it just fucks with me that you could just be like, oh, this human's more valuable than the other. You do know. Therefore, this person deserves to live. This person can just fucking get in the bin.
You do know we live in a capitalist society, don't you?
Yeah, but it fucks with my brain that people think so differently to how they reasonably should. It's like, I mean, that was another thing that was going on with like the whole what should Biden do in his presidency sort of idea of like raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour.
What's the federal minimum wage? What does that mean?
It essentially means across all states it has to apply. Okay. Because at the moment, each state can make their own minimum wage laws, which they do, which some are very low, which is why like tipping's such a big thing in the US, even though that's kind of fucked up. But yeah, like just because you don't have to go to university to learn how to do it does not mean it's not skilled labor. Like, I couldn't work at McDonald's. I know for a fact I couldn't. I couldn't get there for a start. I couldn't consistently be there, and I wouldn't have the social skills or the physical skills to do that job.
And you keep eating the burgers as well.
But it's sort of like when people like say that people shouldn't get like basic living wage or just even below living wage, minimum wage for whatever job they're doing, it just tells me, oh, you don't value that person, you don't value their job. Because when minimum wage workers strike, that's when things start to go to shit. Because those are the people actually
exactly the opposite. Together. I think they do. It's just the value that they assign is incredibly small. It's like they are essentially valuing that person's worth.
It's just
at a very small amount.
During a pandemic, like supermarket workers, delivery drivers, it's like the fact that you don't value those people after all that, it just tells me just a weird mindset that a lot of people still seem to have.
Yes, indeed.
But I think they sort of get into this idea of like, oh, well, their wage is that because they're only worth that much to their employer. I was like, well, they're actually making back more for their employer than they're getting because otherwise there wouldn't be any profits there. So at that point, you're just like exploiting them and paying them as little as possible, which is done across loads of companies.
Yeah, but it becomes
to the point where every job that you go to like that's
a systematic problem, isn't it? Because everybody's trying to squeeze that bottom line. You know, it's kind of, and it at the end result of trying to squeeze that profit out of the, you know, trying to get the lowest sort of price to the public because that's going to attract more customers means squeezing the value of everything that you do. Like, and in the end, that affects the quality of the product.
Even within a capitalist system, raising the minimum wage is just fundamentally a good idea economically because it just injects cash into the people that would be buying the stuff.
Ooh.
And it almost always coincides with an economic boom when they raise the minimum wage.
Injecting cash into people.
Oh, don't give Jeff Bezos Oh, actually, Elon Musk is now the richest guy in the world.
Is he?
Which is terrifying because he's a fucking shitlord.
I'm not surprised because I saw today that they launched SpaceX. Does he still own SpaceX?
Yeah, well, a controlling share, presumably.
They just launched a rocket today with the largest payload of satellites on it. I think it was like 140 something satellites on it. It's like, can you imagine how much you charge to put a satellite into space?
Yeah, essentially the story with him is his family got rich off of mining blood diamonds in South Africa under apartheid, and then he got a share in PayPal. Later, continually lied to the government about what his companies would be doing in order to get more money. And then
the thing is, though, it's really difficult to criticize somebody for lying to the government.
Well, it's essentially just like he's now getting rich off of government contracts, essentially.
Yeah.
For the SpaceX stuff, at least. And then getting rich on overcharging for electric cars.
Have we got any more news to cover?
Well, UK side of things, the sort of proper effects of the Brexit deal are really being felt now.
Yeah, I mean, is there something specific that you're referring to that you know about? Because I have seen plenty of news articles about this sort of thing.
It's particularly been.
I don't know what to believe anymore.
Well, I mean, I would say believe the fishing industry, which is falling apart.
I don't know anyone in the fishing industry though, so how would I get direct information from them?
Well, you can see reporting.
That's what I mean. I don't know what reporting to. Yeah, you can see interviews. Yeah.
But it's. I find it interesting because the sort of response from a lot of Tory MPs. I think he was a Tory, the twat that I saw trying to use this argument of, oh, it isn't because of Brexit that the fishing industry is collapsing. It's because of COVID and the deal that Boris Johnson got through. That has nothing to do with Brexit. It's just an unrelated deal.
It's a weird one for me because I never gave a shit about the fishing industry's role in the... I mean, they were using it as an incentive to vote for Brexit. The Vote Leave campaign were, and at that point I never gave a shit about it because I thought, yeah, I know it's not as good as it could be for them, but at the end of the day it's a small industry, and if you're in it, that's, I can understand that it's a struggle and stuff, but I've come from an industry that an entire industry's been made redundant from, so I don't really, and I can't see any reason why.
I mean, it's sort of
but seeing it now,
at a stage where it's
difficult to use that now as
fucked off on two major crises at the same time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, particularly like shipping right now, it takes weeks, which, I mean, it's fine for the sort of stuff that like I'm ordering, which is currently like a book. Because that doesn't rot. But if you're transporting meat or cheese,
I don't know,
or fish,
I mean, now would be the time
it's going to start rotting,
starting to kick in. Would be when you would expect it to be starting to kick in, the effects,
or especially, which is quite pertinent right now, if you're transporting vaccines, which might be time sensitive.
I know you couldn't get any leaks last week.
I'm sure you could if you asked the right people in the government.
Yeah. Pardon me.
Anyway, yeah, they're all incompetent shitheads. I have some hope because there are at least some people that have been US stateside.
We should do an episode on hope.
We might have already. And I'm not sure how much I could talk about that, but
well, all the more reason.
I have at least seen that Bernie Sanders is heading up the Senate Budget Committee, which is quite powerful.
Every time I hear his name, I think of KFC.
No.
Don't know why.
Every time I hear his name right now, I think of that fucking meme that keeps going around.
Which one's that?
With his mittens at the inauguration.
Did he have mittens on?
Yeah, he had mittens on, and he was sort of just looking like he was just trying to keep warm, but it just sort of became a bit of a meme because, I don't know, the internet's weird.
It is. It most certainly is.
But in the most Bernie Sanders-esque thing ever, they were made by a school teacher in Vermont of recycled clothes and plastic bottles.
Oh, I see.
But apparently a bunch of people were pissed off because him like crossing his arms or something was downplaying a really historic moment when
somebody's always
some dude sitting down.
Somebody's always going to be pissed off. Yeah, we live in the age of taking offense. Anyway, how are we going to do Cruelty?
You might want to rephrase that.
No, I don't.
I would rather discuss it.
It's an interesting one because I know that I have been both a victim of and a perpetrator of cruelty. Probably not to the extent, well, definitely not to the extent that I know some people have.
I think
but
everyone, to some extent, will be in that position.
See, when I started thinking about this, I thought, well, I can think of 3 distinct types of cruelty. There's accidental cruelty, where people experience like people can talk about a cruel wind or a cruel storm or a cruel flood or something like that. Stuff that just happens, which has a cruel effect on people, but that word is used, there's no intent. It's just that there are cruel.
I wouldn't call that so much accidental, but more just like unconscious, I suppose. It sort of implies that it would have a conscious otherwise, but like, I don't know.
But people talk about like a cruel winter.
Yeah, I guess like...
But I suppose that's personification, isn't it? That's anthropomorphizing a season.
Well, I guess like historically people have actually assigned like deities who are largely based on like human personalities to things like seasons and natural disasters.
And then you can do something as a person, you can do something where you don't have cruel intent.
Well, they still do.
But it has the effect of being cruel to someone. That's the second thought that I thought of, that, you're not setting out to hurt someone, but you do. Just by your actions. And then there's what I think of as, I suppose, pure cruelty is when people set out to hurt someone and achieve it. They're doing it for the thrill of, they get a kick out of other people's suffering, or animals, or,
Well, there's sort of different ways of that being, because it's sort of like, when someone does something cruel, like, it's quite a minor example, I would think, of when I tease you, like, while you're setting up by, like, booping you or putting windshields on your shoulder. That's the kind of joking cruelty, but it's like, it's fairly minor, and it's just to have a bit of a laugh and get into the mood of things. But I think sort of what is often more large scale the source of cruelty is where someone's gone, okay, sure, this is cruel, sure, this is bad, but it'll benefit me or something that I believe in more, so that outweighs what I'm doing here.
What do you think of the phrase, you got to be cruel to be kind?
It's kind of based in... I don't know, I kind of hear that a lot when people like justify basically child abuse, which is kind of disturbing. But I think it's kind of people trying to justify like a fucked up idea of discipline in some ways, or...
But to take an example, you might incorrectly, I think, assign that quality to my driving ban and £400 fine when I crashed my car through consumption of alcohol and driving many, many years ago. You could argue that taking away my driving license and imposing a fine on me was a form of cruelty in order to teach me something valuable.
But it's sort of like... In that, it's sort of like, if... I don't think that you necessarily would go out and crash your car again, but it's sort of like someone who would have been in a similar situation may well have done. It's sort of consequences clear and reasoned consequences aren't exactly the same thing as cruelty.
Yeah, I suppose it's difficult. It depends on the person, doesn't it?
Sort of that cruel and unusual punishment. It's like if it was arbitrary or calculated to hurt you rather than to serve some other purpose.
Yeah,
then that would be actual cruelty.
So, what about to serve a greater good? For instance, what if depriving someone of something gives other people benefit?
Depends in what way. It depends like how directly you're talking, because it's sort of,
And to what extent, I suppose, as well.
I guess a lot of people,
I mean, that's effectively what taxation is, isn't it? Is you're depriving some people of their earnings in order to benefit the whole, as it were.
but it's sort of like for the vast majority of people, you're making that back.
It's got to be in a reasonable measure, isn't it, for it not to be cruel? I mean, it's cruel to go overtaxing poorer people and not taxing rich corporations.
Yeah, I guess, because it would be like kind of arbitrary, and it's sort of, I guess, proportional to how much you're likely to actually use those things, because if you have more money, chances are like you might own a business or something that gets more out of using like roads, or if you have workers, hospitals, education system. It's sort of a thing of like, well,
It's really
the more that you put in, the more likely you're going to get stuff back out.
I was just thinking there really is an issue of perspective around the definition of cruelty, isn't there? Because I was thinking like about, I mean, I have, you got to sort of think, is somebody who enjoys the adrenaline kick from being physically cruel to another being, do they have a broken mind, or is it just that their mind doesn't fit within what society has defined, quite rightly, I believe, as a beneficial kind of way to be, an established version of sanity, if you like? Because when you think like that, you've got to think, well, what about, I mean, our race, it's difficult to look at it in terms of now because we're in the now, but you can look back and you can see gladiatorial fighting as cruel.
What?
Well, the gladiator arenas in Rome.
What does that have to do with our race?
The human race.
Oh, I see.
What did you think I meant?
Well, I'd sort of, I think people sort of usually think of Rome as being quite white, but it wasn't necessarily.
Oh no, see, this is one of the things with racism. I never actually think of different coloured people as being a different race, because for me, the race is humanity. But yeah.
I guess more generally less confusable word would be like species or something, but
yeah, I suppose. Is that technically not correct then if you talk about the human race?
I mean, it depends, because language is quite complicated, and I think it's technically correct.
In a biological sense. What is a race?
Generally not a term that we use because it has other connotations.
Yeah, there are species and there are genuses, aren't there? And
yeah, race is kind of it's a made up thing. It has no real basis in actual biology, other than like some inherited
so, like as a species. That idea of people fighting to the death for the entertainment of the masses, to our modern minds, seems like a cruel concept. But it was perfectly normal then. And even more recently than that, in the UK, the prospect of putting people to death for public entertainment. I mean, there were criminals, but people being hanged or hung, drawn, and quartered at the Tower of London.
I mean, they don't fight to the death, and
the idea now, the electric chair now, is
it's not considered that everywhere, but like we watch boxing matches now, and that's not to the death, but like I think gladiatorial
controversial point, that isn't it?
Weren't that often to the death, at least with the celebrity gladiators, because they were quite valuable. You didn't want to lose like your best fighters.
About the but they did
random fight.
I don't know if this is just a biblical story or if it was stuff that happened, but there's the thing about throwing the Christians to the lions.
I mean, yeah, they probably threw people that they didn't care that much about in there for sport, but like,
and then I suppose
they wouldn't have been gladiators.
It's not that but it's not the same thing. But nowadays, you get the idea of people being stoned to death for various things, or having their hands chopped off for stealing in certain parts of the world. Within their culture, that is.
I don't think that's legal anywhere right now. That's not, as far as I'm aware, the cutting off hands thing. Other than like, technically the law does this, but like,
I suppose the point I'm trying to get to is because, like, I mean, even with I know I can't remember which countries it is, but they've now outlawed child marriages in is it Saudi Arabia? I don't know.
I don't think they've still outlawed that in the US. In all states.
You know what I mean? That there are some things which we see as definitely unacceptable, cruel practices. But and this is perhaps the thing that it's really difficult to perhaps get your head around, is I am sure there are many things which are accepted by our society and probably even accepted by us, which at some point in the future will be viewed as cruelty.
Well, I think they are viewed by some people as cruelty. I guess it's sort of on like how visible it is, because if people, I mean, a very prominent example. I mean, I think we've seen it a lot with discussion around like the US border with Mexico, like children in cages and deporting people who, many of whom have lived there like their whole lives, and it's just like a administrative cock up. Whether or not systematically engineered is another conversation, but
I suppose, I mean, a particularly stark example would be, do you think there will potentially ever come a time that the human species will regard our era as cruel for having based our society on making people work for a living?
Yeah. Well, I hope,
in a similar way that we look at slavery now.
I hope humanity lives long enough for that to be a sort of mainstream thing.
And I suppose I have to qualify that in by saying that I realise that at our point in development, there are things which humans have had to work to achieve, but might there come a point where all of that can be done by automated processes?
But like robots, the idea that that's for a living, though, that's a different thing.
To survive, yeah. It's more of a calling or a vocation.
But it's kind of to the point of where it's sort of like, under capitalism, the idea is that you have a choice where you work, but like if you don't work at all, then
see, that's interesting, because that book,
your choice is death.
I'm reading about Mastering the Art of Performance at the moment, about musicians and artists in general. It also refers to other professions like lawyers and doctors, and basically that attitude of approaching the work that you do as, okay, yeah, some people do it for the financial gain, but the people that get the most reward from it are the people who are doing it to serve humanity, if you like, to give something to their.
I mean, I've never been into the world of like formal employment where like I'm getting paid for the work that I'm doing. I do get paid for studying, but that's for different reasons, I guess. It's not like I get paid.
This seems like really trivial, but I'm going to bring up delivering pizzas.
But yeah, it's not though. It's like. I don't
get a huge amount of work money for it, but I do really enjoy that feeling of delivering food to a family and then seeing the kids jumping up and down with excitement because the pizza guys just dropped off their tea.
Although it might not be considered so, like, in terms of how much money it's assigned, that is far more important than some executive of a bank somewhere turning up to a meeting. Because if people stop delivering pizzas, I mean, not necessarily specifically pizzas, but in the middle of a pandemic, it's sort of like, it's
you know what I mean? Just that,
one
that
little quality of life thing that would just make everything easier
jumping
right
up and
now.
down, going, "Mummy, the pizza's here!" Getting really excited. And
Yeah.
like, oh, that's really cute. And that's worth far more than whatever the minimum wage is. Although I'd still take the money as well, but because obviously you've got to live. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a sort of difficult thing to it, but
and it's the same feeling when you're playing music and you look up, you see an
what
audience.
I was going to say is what I've found in various students I've met so far at uni is the people that seem to be there to do something that they're genuinely interested in and want to do something that they personally value rather than going into just a job that makes them money, are getting a lot more out of it.
Yeah, definitely. I got a problem. I know we're only an hour and 20 minutes in, just over, but I need a wee and I've nearly run out of beer.
Well, we can take a wee pause.
You did a Scottishism.
Is that a word?
It rhymes with Scottish jism.
Oh, God.
So, yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
That's very decisive.
It is. I can wait. I mean, what else do we think about Cruelty?
I want to talk about, I mean, sort of the opposite of Cruelty. Kindness.
You're doing an anti-podcast.
I'm not an ant, as far as I know.
You're revolting.
Oh.
You're revolting against the subject of the podcast.
That's cruel.
You got to be cruel to be kind.
But
why would you do the opposite?
Well, no, it was something that I saw about. It's this series. I can't remember who does it. I'll have to look it up. Of basically a therapist reacting to films, because
do you think
a lot of the characters that we see in films aren't necessarily like.
Well, this is interesting because obviously "cruel" is a word that
psychologically okay.
It's a human word. It's an English word specifically, but obviously there are different words in different languages for the same concept. But do you think it's cruel for a lion or a tiger, say, to chase down a gazelle and then brutally kill it and eat it? Do you think that's cruel?
It's less cruel than hunting them as we do.
Well, that is hunting them.
Yeah, but that's a lot more out of necessity. If we're hunting like game like that, it's because it's some luxury. It's like, oh, it's this nice special meat that's difficult to get a hold of, or it's a sort of tropey sort of thing. It's like, oh, we're eating this really rare. And
I've got to admit, there are some venues I've had to play at in the wedding band that make me feel quite uncomfortable. There's one, I won't name where it is, but there's one where basically the whole room, the whole hall is covered in antlers on the walls. And the ceiling, and just the whole room is just coated in mounted trophies, basically, of kills, just basically antlers.
But I think a lot of people...
It makes me feel uncomfortable.
I mean, this is just generally true for animals that aren't humans, is that I mean, even like things like water and food, they're a lot harder to come by, and it's a lot more of a sort of,
well,
you're risking everything to go to like
is,
the watering hole or something.
Putting aside,
whereas we can just go to the tap, and it's like, at most you're going to see a spider.
Putting aside the ethical, moral kind of argument for sort of veganism and eating meat, I mean, there's the whole thing of, you know, there's that argument about whether or not you're hunting for food. Putting that argument aside, but the idea of actually putting the antlers up on the wall, it would be like me stapling a pigskin to my bedroom every time I eat bacon. It's like, you know, if you're going to eat it, fine.
You have like things made out of leather, but then it sort of serves some sort of purpose still. Like if you have like a leather jacket, like it's supposed to keep you warm. Or
yeah, I mean, I used to have a black leather jacket when I was a student, and
I mean, it's not.
You can get
necessary.
alternatives now.
Yeah,
you can get alternatives now.
I mean, I know that I do eat meat, so this is a sort of a bit of a hypocritical thing to say. I don't think it's really necessary to eat meat these days, but
do you think that's habit or?
I think from my side of things, it's a lot of the vegetables that would be the alternative, unless I was just going to eat basically junk food.
I'm going to get deep now.
But it's sort of like things like onions and...
I mean, getting into animal cruelty, obviously there are different ways of rearing animals. For instance, the difference between sort of keeping battery chickens as opposed to free-range chickens. There are arguments for you know, being kind. But do you think the concept of particularly raising and breeding animals in order to eat them for food, do you think that concept in itself is cruel?
I don't know. It's sort of... I think it's something that originated in necessity, and it's just, you know, that's been going on for millennia now. To the point where it's sort of, we sort of progressed to the point where we don't necessarily need that, but there's so much industry built up around it. It's sort of.
I think I literally only just really made my mind up on this, and I think it's
exciting.
I think on reflection, I think it would only be cruel if the animal knew. Because what I was thinking was, imagine if our lives were part of, you know, we were being bred by some godlike entity to harvest the energy of our life experience for their
not being
kind of nutritional needs.
That controllably bred as such, but we are being, I guess, directed for the needs of people that like don't have our needs and interest in their interest.
So that's where the cruelty is inherent. In that, for me, I think if I went through life just living my life and not realizing that the end reason for it, the end goal of it was to feed some entity, as long as I didn't know about it, I could still enjoy my life and I wouldn't feel like I've been subjected to cruelty.
I feel like there's some, I mean, not in the case of like in terms of like feeding us, but and sort of the idea of being buried and sort of returning your body to the earth.
You can, you can get like a sort of biodegradable coffin where you're kind of buried under a tree and you feed a tree, basically. You know what I mean? I
think there's something quite noble about sort of...
Well, everything you are is going to return to the universe, isn't it? Energy and matter.
Yeah, but a lot of it's in the form of shit. And like energy that's just spent on like moving me to go to shit.
Ashes to ashes, shit to shit.
Essentially, yeah.
But I mean,
But
it's very Matrix, that, isn't it?
I want to return to my thought about kindness.
Did you actually get to it?
Well, because you interrupted me.
Well, you can't return to it if you never got to it in the first place.
Right, the channel that I was talking about, which I had to look up, was Cinema Therapy.
Okay.
The particular video I'm talking about, we won't watch it because it's fairly long, and I can summarize the bit that I'm wanting to talk about is reacting to Knives Out. So, possible spoiler alert, because I might say some stuff that's slightly spoilery. I won't spoil too much, so I'll try not to.
I'm just sorry. I've just had a Homer moment. My brain just went ooh, because I just read how to make an Eiffel Tower with bamboo sticks, and I just thought ooh, and had a bit of a kind of a Homer moment. Carry on, please. Talk about therapist reacting to Knives Out.
The particular,
I don't have a monkey with sympathy.
Well, I will have to spoil some things. So
always have to spoil it.
Be warned, if you have not seen Knives Out, it's a very good film and very compelling. I won't spoil the whole thing, but there is a little bit of a spoiler here.
I might have to watch it again because I don't really remember much about it.
Basically, at some point, it's this sort of murder mystery thing where supposedly the sort of head of this very prestigious family has committed suicide. But some detectives been hired to investigate.
Who plays the detective again?
It's Daniel Craig in there is someone role that I cannot do. But yeah, basically at some point in the scene, there's like this in the film. There's this will reading, which is done by Frank Oz.
Is he still alive?
I think so.
Oh no, I'm thinking of Jim Henson. Sorry. Yeah, carry on.
And he basically, up to this point in the film, like everyone in the family, it's a very rich family, have been very nice to the nurse that's like been his companion for.
I'll be nice to a nurse.
At least months, if not years.
If she's nice to me.
Can you shut the fuck up?
Okay.
And it turns out that this head of the family leaves everything to her. And suddenly the mode of that shifts, the dynamic between her and the family, where they've been very nice to her, saying, I was like, oh, if you need any help with anything, we'll keep you in mind, to outright accusing her of murdering him. Or sleeping with him at various different things. Suddenly the relationship very much shifts, which is sort of what some of the analysis from the therapist is about. And then he talks about like the difference between being nice and being kind. Sort of like when they were going to get the money, or at least when they thought they were going to get the money.
I lost the thread ages ago, I'm sorry.
When they thought that they were going to get the money and were being nice to, I think it's Marta, who's the nurse. It's because it didn't cost them anything.
I'm sorry, it's just when you started talking about nurses, it reminded me of being in hospital when I was young. And I wouldn't let them stay in the room when I had a bath in the hospital. They ran the bath for me, and I was about 7 maybe, and there were other kids in the hospital ward that were like, "Don't be daft, they've seen it all before." But don't know. I'm just wondering why at that age. Maybe somebody had been cruel.
Some weird repressed memory here.
Yeah, there would be. Yeah. I passed out. I had concussion.
He talks about the difference between being
passed
kind.
out eating boiled potatoes.
He talks about the difference between being nice and being kind is when it costs you something.
Yeah. Well, I have heard this that you should try to see what it feels like. You should try to do something nice for someone. Without any recognition that there's no way that they will know who's done it, that anyone will know who's done it, that you're not doing it for any other reason than how it makes you feel about yourself. It's not for to be thought of better by anyone else.
Not even that. It's just just to help people out, especially right now. But I do admit I've seen a lot of...
It's quite a difficult thing, though. I mean,
GoFundMe's just scrolling past, and it's just sort of you can feel quite hopeless looking at those, because a lot of them don't reach their goals, and they're people that really need help. But
there's so much...
I can't provide
we are so geared towards being gratified for what we do. That sort of... It's quite a temptation if you do something nice to tell someone about it or to be recognised for it. But it's actually quite difficult to deliberately do something that somebody else will benefit from without... I mean, for instance, we do quite often do the... I don't know what they call it. There's a thing where you take a little thing from a Christmas tree every December, and you basically... It tells you the gender and age of a child who I think is in foster care, not foster care, is in care of some kind. You buy them a Christmas present and you just take it into the shopping centre. Can't remember what it's called. It's like an anonymous gift sort of thing, but it's for homeless kids. Basically, you buy a gift for a homeless kid. Now that homeless kid's never going to know who you are, but it's really difficult to do something like that without being seen or without telling anyone about it, or it's kind of to separate it from getting any benefit from it yourself. I have recently sort of thought to myself, well, hold on, because I've got, mainly it's having a scholarship, but also I have my bursary and student loan, which I'm in a position where I have not lots of money, but a fair amount of money that I'm not likely to actually need to spend on anything. So it's sort of if I do see one of those GoFundMe's, or I've started doing joining people's Patreons, because it's sort of I've enjoyed these people's content for a year. I may as well stop in essence, that's passing it on, because that's essentially your scholarship and your bursary stuff is, the scholarship specifically is somebody has done that. It's philanthropy to benefit you, isn't it? Somebody has that, and there are these scholarship trusts that are set up quite often in memorial for people that they'll leave in their will. They'll bequeath an annual.
It's not necessarily that I won't need that at some point. It's just I don't often spend it. So
no, because we're generous and we let you stay here for small amounts of money, comparatively.
Did you ask Nienna to pay rent?
She moved out when she was 16, I think, or 17.
She moved out when she was the exact same age I am. So actually
17.
Older.
17.
It was the beginning of 2020.
Yeah. I need a wee.
So, anyway.
Yeah, but she was still at school.
She's at college.
Oh, yeah. Well, what I mean is, I'm not. Sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up. I have no problem with it whatsoever. There's a distinct reason for it, and it's probably highlighting exactly what I was talking about before. Is that I wouldn't want to charge you more because you're at the start of your sort of adult life where that is going to come in handy for you.
Yeah, well, point. I have remarked with the sort of savings that I've got that,
and the fact that I brought it up is actually me looking for recognition for helping you out. You know what I mean?
I might have been able to pay off at least a fair chunk of your debts, but I don't think you'd want me to.
No. No.
But anyway,
I wouldn't want to feel indebted to you, because I couldn't be annoyed at you when you throw microphone covers at my head when we're setting up recordings. I'd just feel bad. I don't like being indebted to people.
Given something to you,
I don't mind owing. I don't mind owing banks and stuff, but I don't like owing. I don't like owing people.
I know it.
I don't like owing people, because then I feel like they've got some kind of power over me.
Well,
whereas a bank can go get the fuck.
Well, it is the same thing with a bank.
Kind of, I suppose. But at the end of the day, I could actually have my debts written off if I wanted to.
Okay.
But I would have to declare bankruptcy to do it, and there would be penalties incurred. But
that's exactly having them written off in like a positive way.
No, but yeah, I know what you mean. I'm desperate for a wee.
Well, we can have a pause.
Okay, are you going to talk?
I can if
you can say cruel things about me while I go.
Right. Good.
It's all lies. It's all lies, I tell thee.
Goodbye. What a cunt. Don't know what we're going to talk about now. I feel like there's some sort of pressure on me to actually be vaguely entertaining, but oh fuck! It occasionally hits me that I'm going back to uni tomorrow, and I have a seminar which I think is like pre-recorded, so I could probably not turn up and it would still be okay. But there is a live seminar at like 10 a.m, which is probably a reasonable time to be up by, but like the past couple of days, because I've kind of been slipping, have been like up until like 6 a.m. From like the day before, and waking up like some point in late afternoon. So I'm kind of not used to that sleep cycle, so it's going to be a bit of a shock to my system. But hopefully I'll get into the swing of things. It's just weird that that's tomorrow, and yeah, I'm not ready, but okay. Anyway, just projecting my insecurities into a microphone, because this is the best thing to do on the internet.
I know, I'm lovely, aren't I?
I didn't actually talk about you that much.
I'm sorry, that was a bit of an Austin Powers moment there.
I don't want to know which.
I was just thinking, our Breaking Borders, we probably won't have to find nearly as much material as we think we do if we spend quite as long as we do normally on the news anyway.
It's not about finding enough material to fill the time, it's that I don't want to brush over some very interesting histories when there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about, that like empires that I didn't even knew existed and were like massive at one point. I don't know, but
indeed.
Like, did you know that Lithuania was once the biggest country in Europe?
Really?
Yeah, it had like a whole like it expanded massively in the 1700s. I think it was 1700s, or it might have been the end of like the medieval period. But yeah, it was once like really big.
Weird.
And now it's sort of like, oh, it's just sort of similar to the countries around it. Sorry, any Lithuanians watching. There might be.
What are you sorry about?
If I just insulted you by saying that it's similar to the countries around it. But we would typically think that, I guess. Or probably a fair amount of people haven't even heard of Lithuania.
Is that one of the 3 Baltic states? Is it Lithuania, Latvia, and
I think
Estonia?
It's the southernmost Lithuania.
I always get confused because my geography is shit, as you well know. But I think
it's probably better than most people's, but that's not much of a compliment.
Are they like that? Is there like one at the top, one in the middle, and one at the bottom? Because I think of them as going kind of left to right, but
it's kind of a bit of both.
All right, okay.
Because it's Geography's not very neat, but
yeah, I'm looking forward to traveling when I've got some money. I mean, it's going to be. I know COVID's in place at the moment, so I mean, it's going to be. Hopefully, that will be at least manageable by the time I've got enough money to actually travel. So, yeah, the idea of traveling is. I think it's a very valuable thing to do. Don't you know?
I would love to, at some point, when things are a bit more open, travel a bit on my own if I could. But it's sort of a thing of like...
You can take a year out, go backpacking around Europe.
Well, there's that, but it's sort of like I struggle to function on my own. So it's sort of like I want all the sort of niceness of existing without having to talk to someone, but without my dysfunctionality.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, I mean, it's only dysfunctional alongside something else. You know, it's only abnormal to a norm. And I reckon most people, it's like you saying about, you know, you guys reckoning that I have got at least some form of ADHD. It's like, if that were the case, some people would be looking for some kind of diagnosis so they can kind of understand it and stuff. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter to me because I'm in the same boat as everyone else. I'm just trying to learn to live my life in the way that best suits my personality and mental state and who I am.
I mean, if you have a fairly solid grasp on that already, then I guess that's okay because it's sort of like you might find that similar strategies if you do have something like that.
I do quite possibly. I mean, I would certainly say that I only really feel like I'm growing up, if that's the right word. Maybe 20, 25 years later than most people might expect to be thinking that they would. I don't know. Everyone's different. And I think you've just got to find the best, your best route in life for yourself. I think
I know a lot of people in their 20s that are far more mature than people that I know in their 60s. So
the other thing is, I think independence is something that you find that you might be surprised that you have. Because if you're always around people that you rely on, it's surprising when you branch out on your own how much you can just get on with things. Because
I think
you have to. It's like, well,
being gay just like ages you twice as fast sometimes.
Yeah, how do you know with nothing to compare it to?
Well, it's sort of there's this TV show Pose, which is sort of set in like.
Aging in what sense? Mentally?
I guess sort of in like, yeah, I guess like in what you're expected to have to deal with is like the sort of heaviness of the situations that you're having to deal with and your responsibilities to people. And it's like people in the gay community, especially during the 80s and early 90s,
there'll be a spectrum.
Like, a 40-year-old is like elderly in that community because like people don't normally survive that long, or at least
they didn't back then.
And the sort of idea of, I guess, sort of parenthood to people who
it makes people like Elton John like a grand wizard or something.
Well, I mean, I get, but he's sort of
an elder,
I guess, not like in that sort of community, even if he is part
he was very much at the time back in the 80s.
I suppose so. I'm more thinking about like the New York community, but he would have been probably part of the LA scene.
Yeah, I mean, I know he mixed in a lot of the same circles as Freddie Mercury at the time.
There's a very different sort of class there as well, even within communities like that. Anyway, I guess it's sort of tangentially related to cruelness, but what were we talking about?
I don't know. We don't have to reach 2 hours. We could be winding up soon because we've both got lectures at 10 o'clock in the morning. I've got to be up at 8 o'clock. You wanted me to wake you up, by the way? Perhaps I shouldn't do this on podcast.
Well, I'm not sure. I was talking to myself, sort of, to the microphone.
You're going to try and keep the podcast going, aren't you?
I think it is sort of pre-recorded, but it's something
the podcast?
The seminar. They're doing like a live thing, and
I'm not sure.
They might have a pre-recorded.
We've got a lecture that's. I'm not sure if ours is pre-recorded.
Because I generally find I deal with the pre-recorded stuff a lot better because I can pause it and take notes. And I'm not really used to doing that at the pace someone would be talking.
I'm a shit student in terms of what you're supposed to do. I very rarely take notes.
Well, in one of my courses at the very start, they were like, "You're going to have to remember this, so please take notes and like learn them because we aren't going to like hold your hand through this. Like, you're just going to have to remember this."
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, I mean, is there anything I think you could get disturbingly into the subject of cruelty. I mean, talking about things like the Jamie Bulger case and stuff like that. But I don't feel in the mood for kind of delving into the darker aspects of humanity and mental illness and people, things like Rose West and serial killers and stuff like that. That whole kind of the aspect of cruelty that's seen as mental illness or psychopathic kind of tendencies.
I think there's quite a weird tendency, especially I find this in like crime dramas and stuff, to sort of cast off any act like that as, oh, this is clearly the result of a damaged mind. It's like only a really sick person could do this, and it's like, well, hold on. In actual reality, I mean, sure, there's outliers, but as far as I know, most people with mental illnesses are far more likely to be abused than actually become abusers. Plus, be the mental illnesses and trauma might be like result of abuse.
Yeah. But yeah, I think there's a lot more cruelty that's kind of a byproduct or an accepted kind of necessity of society than those cases where people actually enjoy seeing other people suffering in actual pain.
There's healthy ways to do that.
Well, people do get a kick out of things like what they call torture porn, like Saw and Hostel and horror films that
I mean, I didn't mean that, but like
get entertainment, but people do get a thrill from that. So it is an aspect of humanity that has a place within the psyche.
But
it's maybe maladjusted when
really
people act it out, but
really what's going on there is sort of high on a power dynamic.
Yeah, but it is an aspect of the human condition that there are some people don't feel comfortable with it. And it's interesting actually to think about that. The people that don't feel comfortable with seeing people tortured for entertainment. Well, I mean, we know it's an act, we know it's special effects, but I mean, there are people who, like maybe on the dark web, actually look for the real stuff. But there's a broad section of our society which enjoy that kind of horror that's put on. That's special effects.
Well, it's sort of tension. It's like they don't actually enjoy like the violence of it, but they enjoy the sort of thrill of the tension, and it's sort of in the same way. It's sort of like you enjoy the fear that you feel going up after the fact quite often, but you enjoy the sort of fear and it's kind of just tricking your brain into releasing certain chemicals which make you feel kind of happy.
Well, it is really, isn't it? It's like it's adrenaline and what is it? Dopamine and
weird, fucked up chemistry experiments that are, I mean, if you do them in a healthy, controlled way, then it's fine. It's sort of like, I think you were saying earlier about like, oh, there are people that enjoy seeing people getting hurt. It's like, yeah, and plenty of them is like can do that in a perfectly healthy way with people that also enjoy getting hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. What blows my mind is that all of this is part of an evolving universe, that we are all just small parts of a collection of matter and energy which has organized itself into these individual beings that do these things to each other.
There was a bit of a weird discussion last night on one of the forums I'm in. It's not really particularly related to cruelty, but just about
the forum that you're in is not particularly related to cruelty.
No, neither is the topic, but it's just about like existential weirdness, and there's a website called the Library of Babel, which essentially has every possible combination of, I think it's like somewhere over 3,000 characters in this virtual library, which makes up like 10 to the 447 books or something.
Right.
Which means that everything of that length that has ever been written or ever will be written has already been written, at least in English and with like your standard alphabet with no numbers. But it's just this weird thing of like, that's already just been randomly written.
That's a bit like, that's just like a kind of an electronic version of the monkeys on typewriters, right? In Shakespeare.
Yeah. But it's just this sort of kind of, I mean, it doesn't really mean
I remember
anything.
You saying that was the infinite monkey cage concept. Is that the same thing?
I think that's where that idea comes from, because infinite monkeys on infinite typewriters would have to exist in an infinite monkey cage.
Yeah.
Without your trousers.
Did you ever hear the episode where they were talking about what kind of infinity, though? Are we talking about something that's infinitely wide? Because it could be infinitely wide, but still be only like 2 feet tall, so they're having to stoop all the time.
I don't remember that, but yeah, that is another good podcast that you should not listen to instead of this, but along with this.
It's considerably shorter normally.
Yeah, well, because it's radio. Although the actual podcast version is usually a bit longer.
Yeah. Shall we finish?
Yeah, probably. I feel like you and me are... That's not a sentence.
No, it's not.
I feel like we're kind of tapering.
Yeah. We've kept below 2 hours. There's hope for us.
We
haven't finished yet, but
we won't keep below 2 hours by the time we get to the outro. I'm sure of it, because I will filibuster this podcast.
Gerrymandering is a thing. It's actually a thing. I mean, in the UK.
Yeah.
No.
Surprising.
No, it's not surprising. But I didn't. It's just something that popped into my head that the Tories are again reducing the number of seats that the SNP have in Westminster.
I mean, I think it's technically more proportional, but what would be far more proportional is actually introducing proportional representation, which would, I mean, effectively solve like a lot of problems.
Okay, let's stop. Let's stop being cruel to the audience.
No, but like, there should definitely be proportional representation. It's stupid that we don't have that yet.
Does that mean
basically because it doesn't benefit the two big parties?
Yeah, but that would mean I get more representation than you because I'm fatter.
I mean, I don't think we control. You control that much more area, because I'm ever so slightly taller. I don't think it makes up the weight though, the mass.
Okay, I have more gravitational pull.
Oh, well, if we start going by that, then like the Tories and all the gammons will get far more votes. Basically, what I'm saying is all Tories are fat wankers.
Or did we just invent gravity politics?
Oh God. I don't want to think about that.
Let's finish the podcast.
Because my brain might explode.
Or implode, depending on your political persuasion.
I don't... What?
Exactly. Therapist reacts to Inside Out.
Or, Tories would get more proportional representation over the thickness of their fucking skulls. Do you think I pissed off the Tories that listen to us now? I hope there are none. If you are a Tory, please stop voting for the Tories because they're fucking murderers.
There's a Tory in my wedding band.
Yeah, but do they really
Yeah,
count?
but I mean, the thing is, according to the definitions that we've laid down and the opinions that we've outlined, it doesn't matter who gets into power. The fact that they've got into power makes them a cunt.
Yeah, but there's varying degrees of cunt. It's
I know.
Oh, God.
Oh, I'm thinking about all different... Yeah, okay. Let's finish the podcast.
Well, like a utilitarian outcome of how much of a cunt they are as well. It's like they might be a definitively
I just had completely
evil
the wrong image in my head there.
but like they're okay enough that like they're slightly better than the other guy.
I was thinking about various different
And
plans, and you started
they are
talking about
usually a guy.
utilitarian outcome.
It's horny philosophy hours.
Gravity cunt politics.
To be fair, I think most philosophy would be better if it was just a little
Is
bit
that
more
word offensive
horny.
to some people? Do you think any of our 20 listeners...
What?
Cunt. Do you think any of our 20 listeners don't like the word cunt?
Oh, I think it's got way more weight in America because it's sort of... It's the way that it's used.
When you say weight, is it less... Is it more offensive over there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not like a
I think,
sexist
do you know,
thing.
it's the opposite way around for wanker, isn't it? They say wanker just like off the cuff, but here...
They don't really say it. It's a very British thing to say wanker, I think.
It doesn't really kind of... Oh, well, whatever. Yeah, let's finish.
Yeah, I think wank's a very British term.
Let's finish.
And it's...
Let's finish.
You just decided this is what
Let's
podcast ends.
finish.
Let's Swedish.
Let's Norwegian.
Let's...
Danish.
Oh... I never have a Danish.
Lithuanian. Oh, the fucking Danishes at Caribbean Beach Resort I had for breakfast. They were something else. Anyway, carry on.
That was over 2 years ago.
Oh, scary, isn't it? I'm still paying.
Anyway,
A
yes.
lot less now.
We should wrap up because you're a cruel piece of shit.
It's 11 o'clock and we have we
Anyway.
both have a lecture in 11 hours.
Anyway.
Spaced. Did we finish Spaced?
No. Anyway. I have been Fireball.
I have been the Orbiter.
And this has been Breaking Bollocks, episode 77. Cruelty.
Bye-bye, knobheads.
Yeah, fuck off, you wankers, you piece of shit, you fucking cunt wanks.
Don't be cruel.
Oh, I thought that was the point.
What if one of our listeners... See, if we get one less listener now, I'm going to assume they've committed suicide because you were cruel to them.
Good. Please, that is not legally binding. I do not want you to commit suicide.
No, don't. Seek help if you need it. We're here. If we're any use
Please
to anyone.
do not seek help with us. We are not qualified.
We are helpless.
Anyway.
How do I escape from this nightmare of existence?
You press the stop button on the recording.
This podcast is part of the After Dark Podcast Network.